Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for taking your time here today. I'm extremely excited to be your moderator for today's discussion, for today's conceptual discussion on Pixel. My name is Wayne Fogle. I'm with the Institute for Simulation and Training at University of Central Florida. And what makes me really excited to be here today is that UCF has such an incredible history when it comes to digital twins. We've done amazing work, groundbreaking work, innovative work within academia, within industry, and within the government. But what we've never done, what we've never been a part of, is a performing arts center and its associated digital twin. So today, this discussion, we're gonna have a lot of fun. It's gonna be interactive here with the members of the panel on stage. And as we go through it toward the end, I'm gonna open it up to questions, so make sure that you're priming yourself as we get to that point, okay? Looking for a hearty discussion as we go through this. But without any further ado, because you didn't come here to hear from me, you came here to hear from our panelists, and we have quite the distinguished group with us here today. So I'm gonna start by introducing Dr. Grace Bochenek. Grace is the Executive Director for the Pegasus Research Institute, as well as the Director for the Institute for Simulation and Training. Prior to joining UCF, she held positions in both the Department of Energy and Department of Defense as a member of the Senior Executive Service and has over 30 years of technical and managerial experience. She served as Director of the National Energy Technology Laboratory and the Chief Technology Officer of the United States Army Materiel Command and Director of the Tank Automotive Research, Development, and Engineering Center. Tongue-tied. Grace also held a presidential appointment as the Acting Secretary of Energy during the 2017 administrative transition, and has been recognized numerous times throughout her career with awards including the Presidential Rank Award as Meritorious Executive. Grace is also a board member of the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and a member of the Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine of Florida. Welcome, Grace. Next coming to the stage is Michael Tschanz. Michael is an engineering consultant and professional musician. He recently retired from Disney, where he led a multidiscipline team which developed mathematical and physics models for transportation, ride, and animatronic systems, custom software and network applications, and robotics. The responsibilities for this team included development of optimized algorithms, servo controllers, and interactive and immersive experiences. Michael's background includes designs of numerous attractions at various Disney theme parks. Michael also led Disney's patented scientific data analytics initiative focus on digital twins and attractions predictive maintenance. Prior to Disney, Michael developed precision guidance algorithms and aerospace sensor simulations for Texas Instruments. Michael earned his bachelor's from Ohio Northern University and a master's in electrical engineering from University of Texas, Arlington. Welcome, Michael. And last, but certainly not least, is Eileen Smith. Eileen is the program director for applied research for over 22 years and has been leading E2I Creative Studios in developing interactive learning and training competency systems. Her educational background of interpersonal communications and social-based theater have been instrumental in shaping diverse modeling and simulation projects and have driven innovation. Theater, instantiated into both STEM and high-risk training, are part of her 30-year career, all of which bring her to the stage today. Welcome, Eileen. So we'll go ahead and jump right into this discussion, and I'll start with you, Grace. Can you talk to us about digital twins and their impacts?
So are we moving around?
Absolutely.
How do we want to do this? You know, it's a Sunday, it's a beautiful day here in Orlando, and it's just wonderful to be here and to be part of what I think is a pretty exciting way of bringing technology and the arts together. So I am so honored to be here, to be a part of this group who are having this conversation about digital twins. And so we all live in this world of digital, right? We're all tied to phones, we're tied to things, and a lot of information and data these days, right? So this whole digital transformation is happening. And so people always ask, what's a digital twin, right? Well, a digital twin is nothing more than an exact digital replica. It could be of a system, a product, a process. But what can you really do when you have this digital twin, right? So you have this physical thing, and now you have this digital world. Well, guess what you can do? You can start simulating. You can start analyzing data and information and optimizing whatever it is that you're building or thinking about. And at the same time, knowing we're in this connected world with all this data and information, this digital twin can receive real-time information, sensors, right? We hear about sensors. We hear about how in our phones, people are like keeping track of things that you're interested in, how you're interested. So now you're blending, again, now you're starting to blend in the ability to take in data, sensor data, start applying artificial intelligence and machine learning. And in the future, even some reasoning, right? So what does this all mean? Then the next great thing that I really think is really fascinating about digital twins as they coexist together is that there's this feedback, right? How are people using it? How is all this data and information being used and fed back into the real systems? So there's this element of, hey, you got a real physical thing like this building. We can create the digital replication of it. We could instrument it and have data and information in real time. And wow, what it opens up opportunities in terms of decision making. So this is why we're excited. We're excited because this is this is what Orlando's about. It's around modeling and simulation. It's about human performance, and it's about the arts and humanities and the blending of that. So thank you all for being here, and I look forward to the rest of the conversation. Oh, you want me to keep going?
Well, actually, we're
Okay,
going to...
I could if you want.
You absolutely can.
Well, I mean, it's really important because it's not like this thing just turned on and everybody said, oh, we should do digital twins. We're really doing this right here today in Orlando, and we have been. So I think Wayne alluded to it when he says, well, yeah, there's a lot of defense industries here, and they've been using modeling and simulation, and they're starting to move into the ability to create digital twins for prototyping and evaluation, all the things I talked about, right? Oh, we all know about Lake Nona and everything that's happening on the medical community here. Oh, wow. Did anyone know that the VA hospital is one of the only hospitals in the country that has a totally digitized, unit there to do, to train surgeons and nurses, and that's what one of the other expertises we have, within the University of Central Florida. And so you see these things building, and the image you see right there is a real actual, you might be hearing about semiconductors, right? Because the whole world, as you move towards all of this automation, you got to have those chips, right? You got to build the chips. Well, right here in Osceola County is the hub for semiconductor advanced packaging. And so what are we doing with that, right? What are we doing with that in terms of digital? So there's real machines, and we're actually creating the digital replication of their fabrication processes to help them do a whole bunch of things. So you can see there's so much opportunity, and it's just exciting to be a part of it and to bring all of us together to move us towards the future. So thank you.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful segue. I appreciate that start into the discussion, Grace. Michael, I'd actually like to turn it over to you. With your background, your experience using digital twins at Disney, how have you seen the impact of digital twins link between the physical and digital?
Yeah, so we started in earnest probably about 20 years ago, actually applying simulation and modeling to the development of all of our attractions. It's an extremely complex path in order to be able to get from a design concept of something we're thinking about doing from an immersion experience into actually bringing it to life and having our guests experience it. So it's as I always like to say, we do custom applications, right? We build prototypes. And a lot of these are industrial systems that we then end up putting people on. And understanding exactly how those are going to run and operate is very important in advance so that when you deliver them and they're in operation, you know exactly how they're going to run. So going back to the discussion about like what is a digital twin, from our standpoint, it always has to start with a model. And it has to be a way to be able to do what-if scenarios, like, and you bring in different data sets and try them out, and then look at what that model ends up doing, and then hone in on an answer, optimize it, run it over and over again. The wonderful thing about digital twins and everything that's happened over the last 30, 40, 50 years, and going back to like what Grace was talking about, you know, this has been in the works through aerospace for decades. They used analog computers prior to the invention of like a digital computer that is how you do these now. But the concepts are still the same. You start with a very rigorous engineering model, you validate it, you verify it, and then you start running data sets through it. And then once you have that, you can take that model and then reuse it over and over again. You can use it for doing the predictive maintenance at the end of the day, because once you take a look at your robotic systems and they're running, and you compare that to what is actually in operation, you can do a comparison between those and then find out how well the overall systems and everything is running, so that you can make predictive estimates about like things you may need to do in the future in order to be able to keep the operations of those optimal. So that's always been our viewpoint, and I say our even though I am retired now. But you know, back when I was working on this and with our team and everything, is to try to figure out the best way to apply these modeling methods so that you could come up with an optimal solution, and then bring them to life better, faster, and cheaper. That's the thing I always like to say about modeling simulation digital twins is, you know, people say you can only pick two of the better, faster, cheaper. The beauty about modeling simulation, doing really detailed models, you can actually do all three.
And you know, one thing before I know, because you said something that I think is really important, you know, the ability to like look into the future, right? And to really understand. And at the same time, look backwards and you know, kind of understand if there were failures, what would you do different? And you can't do that in any other kind of environment.
Well, and again, that's a great segue into our next slide, where, Eileen, I'm going to turn it over to you. With this conversation of better, faster, cheaper, which is what we can do with these digital twins, as we're looking forward and looking back, can you discuss with us, provide us some insight on the theatrical uses of what we're here to conceptually discuss, which is Pixel?
So let's unpack this a little bit, because my background is high technology here, but my degree was in theater, social-based theater. So this idea of how do we use interactive media to help us create better. So as we look at the Pixel, it's really the fusion of traditional theater and these other ways to use a space. So dynamic layouts, as we're looking here, ways to use different interactions, real-time adaptability to new layouts, new uses, new techniques. So the digital twins really look and enhance both live performances and training. And that's one of the things we really want to talk to you all today, to look and see, so we pick that apart. Before we layer on those other uses, let's look a little more about how we use it in design. We're going to talk about three different things: planning and design, operations, and then audience engagement. And we're going to put those things through both theater and the other uses. So if we look at the idea of planning and design, as a set designer, as a lighting designer, as a director, as an actor, being able to look at a stage, being able to see a digital copy of it, being able to have that digital copy able to let me explore the physical space before I have to set things in stone. I may be changing to a new theater to do something. I get to run everything through that, so I'm ready to go on the first day. I know more, I have objective data, and that's how I really work it to make the best performance. We intuitively do that in theater, but it's very subjective, and we do it well. How we can make it objective, we can even bring in more data that's replicable. And as Grace said, looking at this the historical and the live going.
Hey, Eileen, can I just real quick?
Yes, ma'am.
So just think about this. You got to shut your eyes for a second because you're looking at what we always do, these kind of two-dimensional images. But what we're talking about is real models that are three-dimensional. And so when you're in this digital twin and digital world, now all of a sudden it's you're looking under things, you're looking behind things, you're getting the actual 3 dimensions, and that's a really, it's profound for what you're trying to say in terms of, understanding and planning, and you could put yourself in so many different perspectives.
It's optimizing that use of space before I use the space. And as an actor, you get your blocking, and then you go home and you think about it, and you can make very vivid pictures. But the ability to actually, while I'm thinking about it, look at space and realize, as I have right now, that I could spring backwards 5 feet, 3 feet, in a very wonderful response. I'm not going to hit the wall or knock the set over. It's a critical thing to know if you're a stage actor. So this idea of just physical memory of what I'm going to do and what I have done. But let's look because the digital twin and an audience experience doesn't start when the curtain opens and the curtain shuts. So what is this idea of understanding the audience from the transitions from stage to stage, the idea of the building and the audience flow, and what are those amenities and accessibilities that we want to make sure we have for everyone, so when they get out of their car to when they exit the building, whether it's a theatrical use or a training use, we have engaged them, and we understand how to use their systems and their time in the most optimum fashion. And some of that has to do with how we come into the building and how we leave the building. So as we see people moving through, I can start to craft exits and entrances. I can look, as Dr. Phillips does, where is something happening that I really want to make our entrance over here, so we can balance the audience flow outside of the theaters. All of those types of things that we look at a lot when we think about it. I can gather data in time, so 3 years into the digital twin, I can also tell you every single way that was designed, how it worked, how many people were in the audience, and everything like that you'd need to make a really good objective decision. The last thing we want to look just here, though, this idea of interactive and entertainment and getting people engaged. So, are those people engaged? And what are those people? What are those red people, and why are they doing that? Everyone knows you can have an audience. Used to be if people were falling asleep, the heads would, and motion capture will, we can sense when that happens. Nowadays, they're probably doing this because they're checking their phone. In any case, they're not engaged. We've lost them. As a director, the ability to try things out, I may use preview audiences. You've all sometimes maybe been a part of a preview audience. You really use them to work things out. Imagine being able to do in a digital twin where it's like, stop, all right, cut that by 2, and I want different things over here, and all of a sudden when you run it again, everyone is staying engaged. Point in time? Yes. Points in time, over time, are what make up the data that makes a digital twin really, really rich. So anything from y'all thought on that?
I would say, again, you have to close your eyes and say, okay, well, how is this really going to be, very different, right? So the ability, and I know you in your past have done it, the ability to even model all of those humans entering, right? That whole pedestrian traffic, you can start modeling that, right? And then you can start analyzing things because you understand human patterns of what they see, where they stop, what are they looking at. So there's all these, which is fascinating to me because it's basically putting together like an eclectic set of models based on what you're thinking about and trying to understand. And it just, again, it's all endless possibilities to some degree.
Yeah, and you can take all that information, all that data you've collected, all those models you built, and learn from them and do things better in the future and figure out about how you manage, the flow into the facility or in the development of this to begin with. So, Grace is touching on this idea of agent-based modeling, which is you have agents that like interact with each other and then walk through different things. We at Disney had done this in the development of a lot of our transportation systems and our new roadways, and we studied those in great detail to make sure we were very confident about how those roadways would meet those requirements. And that's one of the things that you can do with digital twins is once you get those models set up and somebody says, I needed to do this, I needed to do this, I needed to do this, the digital twins can help you verify that you're going to meet those requirements, and then you're successful at the day of opening.
And many times how when you reach an impasse, different possibilities can help you find what's the best path forward. Yeah.
Well, and as we prepare to transition to this next slide, what I find fascinating so far about this discussion and about this concept as well is that, as we've heard about digital twins being used at Disney, and how I would almost frame it as we go into the next part of the discussion is it feels almost like a singular use. As you're building that attraction, as you're maintaining that attraction, which I think we'll get into here in a little bit, you and your team are able to engage with that digital twin. For a lot of our aerospace and industry partners, again, it's a certain level of technology or management team that's engaging with it. But if I'm hearing you correctly, Eileen, this sounds like this digital twin is interactive with students, faculty, and other members of even society as we're moving forward to be able to interact and really develop what the full capability of Pixel.
Absolutely, because Pixel's capability is a large space for creative innovation. So just like we saw go by on an earlier slide, the helicopter in the space, which I'm sorry, but that immediately made me think of a very unique staging of Miss Saigon. And I'm like, okay, what could I do on projections on the walls? How could I disappear the... I was off and going. Very nice slide. But that is the idea of it. How can we start taking a look at the space and the facility 24/7, 365, and when are the appropriate reasons and uses to rearrange this space? Because, can you go back one slide? Because I just wanted to make people aware, as concepted, and remember we're dealing with concept sketches, which is what's really exciting about it, everything you see inside those standing sort of set walls can come away. So the entire of those two spaces, the one currently set for a theater and the one currently set for music, disappear, leaving you with an extremely large space. Think about this hall. This is being used for a theatrical. If I take everything out of here, I'm left with walls. I've left with a bunch of sensors and lighting up here. Imagine all of this space censored. It tracks me as I walk. It can track all of the movements of all the moderators over the last 36 presentations done so that we can get rid of wherever that squeak comes from on the floor. Sounds stupid, but someone just spent hours down at the semiconductor plant trying to figure out why a certain chip process was failing. And there's like 79 processes in some of these chips, and it was failing. Why? The way they found out eventually, right now, was someone went into the physical fab, all suited up, and went from area to area, and they just ran wafers until it went off. And they found out that something had happened in one of the machines, and the only way they could find that out was someone heard a click, and that click shouldn't have happened. Do it again. The click happened again, and that's how they found it. That hunt and peck, it's like, that's not the way to do it. So that's another immediate use I saw that just happened, that we just were talking about with NeoCity about 2 months ago.
So one thing, I mean, when you're in this kind of a virtual space, right, and you're thinking about the future of performing arts, right, there's all kinds of, I mean, one is, I think, first of all, it becomes a place where you can have truly interdisciplinary, or you want to call it transdisciplinary. This is where innovation is going to happen. because it's going to be the discussions about things like that, issues like that, that might be solved technically, or that might not be solved technically, and it's a different, process or an adaptation. So I really believe that these kind of environments create the kind of innovation that's needed, and it's fun to be a part of all that innovation. And then when I saw, when Eileen was talking a little bit about, audience experience, right? So if I have my hat and I'm like the person in charge of safety, which kind of transitions a little to this, right? What do I care about? Well, geez, if there's a fire, how do I get people in and out of here? So how can I use this digital twin to kind of look at that, right? And to exercise it and to see what happens when it really happens, to your point, right? And then to adjust our procedures and processes. So it has so many opportunities, and I keep saying that, and it sounds a little redundant, but it's all about the people from different viewpoints trying to solve something together and then really coming up with some unique solutions.
So I think that's a great transition. I will tell you, in my mind's eye, as we've gone through these slides, thank you, Eileen, I can really visualize the theatrical impacts and how we can change and maneuver things and some of the great capabilities. But we're getting more than that with Pixel. We're getting more than just the theatrical capability. So I'd ask you first, Grace, where do you think this innovation could take us within other industries?
One is, I think, this is in some ways leading the way, right? To have this capability, again, if you take it from different perspectives and different hats. So if I'm, law enforcement, or if I'm, somebody in the fire department, I'm using these tools, these same models that are developed, that are now validated, that are helping us understand operations and predictions. I'm using it for what I need it. And at the same token that maybe from the perspective of a performer, right? How would they use this? It could be used to help train or practice, or, to think about their whole theatrical, presentation, right? And so I think about it in that way, different views, if that makes sense, Wayne.
It does. And looking at that, let me just say one thing. The idea of being able to hold, in the context of this, large training events and be able to blend the physical and the digital in the space to put the people through the most beneficial. I will say this piece of burning house that you see right here is an artifact left over from something we did with the Orange County Fire Rescue. So think about all of our homes in Orange County. The lieutenant on the first truck is the fire commander, even if it's your first fire. So we started with simulation about 10 years ago, which is what Grace is saying. Modeling and simulation has been marching towards digital twins. What we haven't had until now is a lot of the data connectivity that we could start actually turning that idea of objective data over time. So I think that's something very important, because the ability to do that is what opens up some of these other opportunities for use of the space.
And before the other part of it, because you heard my background in defense, so if you're in the Defense Department, you're training an individual soldier, airman, Marine. You're training at a unit level, so a group of people. Sometimes you're training across geographical distances, and so now you're kind of training today from a common data source, from a common model, from a common environment. You create consistency in training across the way. So if you think about, having this large performing arts that could sometimes transform itself to helping support any kind of maybe a more national security or defense exercise, now all of a sudden you can have, 20, 30, 40, maybe more people in a virtual space, all doing different kind of operations and training as a unit together. And I think it just has it'll have huge impacts.
So I'd like to turn it over to you for another question, Eileen.
Okay.
So same question, but with a slightly different twist to it. When it comes to STEM and education, where do you see this virtual ability, this digital twin ability to be able to adjust, adapt, bring people in from different places? How do you see that impacting in those fields?
Sure. So what you have up here is a concept image. If we get a certain National Science Foundation, it might be more than that. But what is the ability of us to look at these very large level STEM training events? They're happening now. There's large training events. There are challenge events. There used to be a maker challenge for high schoolers in Central Florida. I don't know if that's still going on. But the idea of bringing together as a cohort very talented STEM learners, maybe at a level of middle school or high school. Maybe you turn it on its head and go, I want to open it up to multi-levels of participation, but I'm going to do it all about space science and about, in this case, exploring lunar water. So what I start building onto with this use case is the idea of rich exploration using the data and the interactivity and the capabilities of simulation. And I start building this very rich picture of different people, and it kind of takes off something Grace was talking about. Different people within a team will use that digital twin in a different way. Like I said during theater, a director, a lighting designer, a stage prop provider, all have different distinct uses around that one element, that one entity. That's what digital twin can also look at with different dashboards and different views that help everyone use it well. Here, my just goal would be that Central Florida becomes a place where we bring people together for large training and large demonstrations of capability and innovation within the STEM field. We have many of the services, many of the large entities, including Disney, including the other themed entertainment. They support STEM activities, and our students do really well when they go out to USA and Westinghouse and things like that for competitions. We don't yet have a history of some of those competitions happening inside Central Florida and actually hosting them. And I think with the connection to the Space Coast, with the connection with a lot of space industry and looking at a lot of expeditions to the lunar surface, I think that's something that could be a very nice synergy for Central Florida as far as economic innovation and almost brand building for the region.
So if I could just, so, boy, we don't want to say how old we are, right, for sure, but, boy, people, children today, K through 12, they're learning way different, right? Just what they have access to, what their tools are, how they're using things so differently. Again, they're going to move us forward too, right? They're going to propel a lot of these things forward and are setting expectations for it, I think, right? Because they're really used to it. So STEM, I just want to, as somebody who, helps support everything around STEM, it's just so important to, to our country. And thank God we live, in a city and in a region and an area that has such a strong, technical and engineering and scientific and computation skill set, right? I mean, we're blessed with that. And so one of the things I would just say is, a lot of times, because I'm an engineer, right? And so a lot of times you're trying to solve something, you don't really get to see what the problem is. You're trying to understand the problem. So a facility like this or the Performing Arts Center like this, really, could you imagine? So I'm some, young person who wants to create some new sensors and I'm working on new materials. Well, I can be part of listening to what do I need? What do they really need? And so you're starting to bring that kind of engineering discussion together with the usage discussion of what this is really trying to accomplish. And by the way, then you have a facility to test it all out, get the data. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, well, I was going back to also, and I think that falls right into where, we've got to train the future generations in science, engineering, math, and the arts, right? There's going to be such a big labor demand for this, but there's also, less people available to accomplish many of these tasks. So we're going to have people be extremely well trained, and we're going to have tools that create like force multipliers. And this almost kind of does both. This creates an environment where people can explore some of their different ideas about how they would do things in science or math, or present different opportunities to people and say, look, if you follow down this path, you could study these things, or you could do this, or you could end up working on Broadway productions, and these are the kind of things that you could end up working at. And you could create all sorts of, again, what-if scenarios for people to think about what their future careers might end up looking like, and then help develop them in this environment. And we've got to have tools like this simply because demographics are changing so rapidly, and we've got to be able to have an environment like this in order to be able to help train our future engineers and scientists and medical doctors and arts and producers and everything, so that they can come up to speed so much quicker because of the demand that's going to be in the labor force.
And I'd offer to jump in. I feel like, just to be a part of the discussion a little bit here, the blending of the arts and sciences when it comes to this is absolutely fascinating as well. And I think that's really the innovative side that's going to transform education and academia and industry as well. Just that ability to be able to flex and bring in all the components of a person, and not just pigeonhole people into, okay, you do theaters, you're an arts person, you do engineering, you're a scientific person. Instead, blending those two worlds and getting the whole of the person involved.
Yeah, I've just got to tack on the back into that point just for a second, because when we were always looking at recruiting new engineers for our space, and I think I mentioned this to Eileen before, we were talking about, we always looked for them to have some side of an arts background. It wasn't necessarily, always a requirement, but what we found is that blending of, like what you just said, around the area of making sure that people have both understandings of what's going on. That other side, the creative side, would help solve those very difficult problems that you couldn't find in a textbook. They could rely on their problem-solving skills from their right half of the brain, along with the rigorous engineering that they've built from the left half. And if you can combine those together, then a lot of times you can solve these problems that people haven't been able to solve, and then put them in an environment like this, then you've got another way for them to help develop those solutions.
And bingo, innovation. I mean, really, it's innovation, right? It's creating new things,
And
right? Economics,
That's what I was going to say, innovation, like you and I have talked this before, Grace. Innovation is what drives economics, drives business development. It is the biggest multiplier when you think about the returns on investment is innovation. It's always going to be that. You can always replicate things that you've done over and over and over again, but innovation at the end of the day is what's going to solve problems and is going to drive businesses and new economic development.
Well, and I think you actually answered my question when it comes to corporate. At least what I'm hearing is not just the innovation, but also blending some of the discussion, the multiple use of the space, using a digital twin so you can maximize that environment virtually. That way you don't have as much from a corporate aspect downtime when it comes to the use of a room, per se. So as we're using this, we could have multiple people utilizing the digital twin of this room for multiple different purposes, providing their additional rehearsal time or providing the correct setup. So you could do a performance in here or have a panel or a reception, and all those things could be planned simultaneously, maximizing the use of this room so that the only limitation is the physical use of this room when that time comes.
Correct. It's that you step out of the digital and step into the physical, and it's an exact replica. So yes, and that really is that is one of the things people will have to get used to, because that always brings up a little bit of skepticism. Is it really the same? Really? Is it 5 steps back there? And it does need to be exact. So that's really where data has come. We can get it so exact now, where we used to be able to get a swag of it. And I just want to point out that that particular semiconductor tool that's a wireframe of the model that Grace talked about in the very beginning when she showed a rich, colorful picture of the actual tool. That's another idea we're going to pick on this about. That's the level where we get the data. What exactly is that tool? What exactly do we drill down? What are the processes? What are the procedures? What are the chemicals that go in there? Hint, hint, for someone who's really a chemistry nerd. Oh my goodness, semiconductor fields needs every single one of them. Physicists for physical deposition, all needed. It's an amazing conglomeration of really all the societal skills, including business. Because in the end, for all here, for government and industry use, business rules end up ruling the day. Because that's the way we move forward with a plan that's focused, and we're understanding how do we minimize the risks and maximize the results.
So just to pull on that for a real quick second, I know we're probably trying to get onto some other topics maybe, but I mean, I think too is when you have this kind of a capability, it's going to change the way people buy things, right? Or how corporations make decisions. They're very much data-driven today. But could you imagine like a facility like this, and I'm designing a new aircraft, and sure, today you can immerse yourself in a model and you can see a piece of it. But could you imagine like standing in a facility that would be a replica of the exact aircraft? And your team is walking around and making decisions about cost or you're talking about performance, right? But you're looking at, there's no place where you can do that very large size, and you think about, just being on the Space Coast here, right? Near the Space Coast, all these launches. What kind of opportunity is that going to open up in terms of just designing the systems, analyzing the systems, but to look at them at scale in one single space, which is really different than what you can do today.
Or when you think about people having to operate in that environment, right? So you have all your staff that are having to interact with certain computer systems and or control systems and or operational systems, and think about what things would look like when they're doing how they would operate in that environment and get a feel for that human-machine interface. And you could make changes and say, well, if you could put this here, this would be much more intuitive for me to be able to look at that. Can you move this over here? This is very confusing for me. If you could give me like a representation of how this would look here, then I can be much more efficient in my job that I would execute on something like that. So certainly when you think about space systems, either internal to the spacecraft itself or those people that are having to play a support role in the operations environment.
That's a great segue, because as we go into this next portion, Michael, turning over to you, so I think we've gone down the customer experience side and the business case use side and innovation, all very important. The thing I personally, as just in my own life, I kind of nerd out about is maintenance around my own home. Because, Lord forbid, the 9-volt battery goes out at 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's when it goes out on your fire alarm and it starts going off.
You're lucky you're tall.
So, but on that aspect, there is a predictive maintenance that goes as part of operations when it comes to digital twins. Could you talk to us about that, Michael, and what your experience has been?
Yeah, and I thought Eileen did a great job when she was talking about that example with the audio, with some of the semiconductor plant and having to walk in there and hear that. We've actually, so our team, when I was there and we were spearheading this data analytics solution, and its idea was to bring in all the sensor data from your operational system and look at it at very high rates of speed so that you could do predictive maintenance and understand when something is about to have a problem. And what we found was that there wasn't really something available in the market for what we were looking for, and it wasn't doing it anywhere nearly fast enough. And so like when you think about audio, you have to be able to manage that data stream coming in. That and video, those are very high bandwidth requirements. So you need data analytics solutions that can support that. And they have to be open, and they have to be be able to work on very high performance computer systems. And so that's one of the things we ended up doing, was to be able to support things just like that. And we found it to be very successful and to look at it, because like you said, you had to have somebody like walk in there and hear that. The issue with that is that what you want to do is have that model, once that person knows exactly what they're listening for, then train that model with your digital twin. Then in the future, when it starts to show up again, you don't have to have that expert in the area in order to be able to do that. But to help develop that digital twin and that model, you could use a facility like this or other things like this in order to be able to understand that predictive maintenance solution. But you do need a very capable visualization system like this along with a computer system like this, and you put those together, and then you can get very good, strong, accurate understandings about things that are coming up. I've talked about these data points before, and I've made sure I can say this, even though I'm now retired from Disney, but the amount of, we're bringing in like in the neighborhood of like 100,000 sensors at a speed of about 1,000 times a second, and managing about 200 billion points of data per hour. And so when you do something like that and you look at that, you can really get a deep understanding about how everything's functioning. And then you take that and you put it in a visualization environment like this, people get a very quick understanding about how things are working, how they're operating, and things that they need to take action on.
And you mentioned, when you first said, one of the benefits, right? It's all about doing something faster, saving money, right? And so when you think about the idea of predictive maintenance and predictive analytics to help support operations, it's all about that. I mean, don't you hate like when your car says, okay, when you have 1,000 more miles and then you should go get your oil changed. And it's just based on, it's not based on, or today, they're getting there, but it's not based on, the real time, like how you are operating that vehicle, right? It's based on some other numbers and things like that. So in some ways, it ends up creating cost savings at the end.
Yeah, in fact, that was the main driver for us, was like economics, because we wanted to make sure that we could get things taken care of ahead of time. We always like to say targeted maintenance. We want to make sure that, to your point, Wayne, I love your example about and you're a maintenance nerd. That's awesome, actually. I didn't know that until just 5 minutes ago. But people don't realize how important that is in order to be able to get that stuff, because like you don't want to be doing it like at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? You want to have a time that you can plan to go do those things. And so if you can have a system and a facility and everything to be able to help manage all that, then you can do it. And the economics at the end of the day ends up driving all these decisions.
And so just in terms of this performing arts center, what that's really saying is that when this is up and operational, it's going to be very efficient, right? It's going to be very efficient, and it'll probably be one of the world, one of a kind, right?
That's why when we started talking about this.
I know,
and
it's exciting, isn't
I
it?
know, Eileen was talking about this, and we just kept talking. Like, it's so exciting about seeing something that could really accomplish something at this kind of level and help people understand how things work. We're visual beings. That's who we are as humans. We understand things visually. Even in the sciences, that's where people ultimately end up making those discoveries and everything.
Well, thank you for that. Now I'd like to turn it over to Eileen. So I think that's a great segue into this next part of the discussion, which, if you could talk to us a little bit from my standpoint, I'd say any system or organization, the most important part of the whole thing is the people.
Thank you.
So
That's great.
to have the right people in the right place, the smart staffing solutions, how does this help with that solution as well?
So it helps in a number of different ways, and we can look at the person, we can look at the job, we can look at the team, we can look at the environment. So there's sort of layers of how competent work is done. One of the things about a digital twin, in my mind, the center of that digital twin, if I'm talking about a human performance and performance competency on the job, is each worker. What do I know? How do I apply that? And have I gotten the right training to do my job? So, as we're looking at this and we're seeing information about what happens to be an oil field services job, I'm looking and seeing, here's the environment that I'm working on. Here's how many workers were on here. So it's been expanding over the past 7 days. That's a level of detail that is very informative. Now let me go a step further than that. If the people in this room were the teams that worked and supported this rig, I could start also asking things like this. If I knew about people and about what their knowledge, skills, and attitudes were at any particular moment in time. Not to be pejorative, not to make somebody feel like they're not trained well enough, but companies also have something called intergenerational turnover. People want to retire. We found this off when we were dealing with the fire department, and no one was signing retirements for the battalion chiefs because there was no one qualified to come up and take their place. So this idea, and it happens in many industries, I'd like to retire, but I don't have anybody behind me. Well, sometimes you don't have anybody behind you because you're literally only looking at your small team. But if I looked at this whole team again, I may find that of the person I'm looking who really wants to retire, there's 5 people in the room, in the team data I'm looking at, that have 80% of the knowledge. They've been here for enough time where they have, 30% of the skill set, and some of the attitudes that they have are different than the skill set of the team, of the person, and the level and the age range of the person who wants to retire, but that's okay, because that's what we want to understand, how as we bring up new workers and new team members, the knowledge is high for the industry, the skills are high for the job, and the attitude is correct for the current and future health of the team. That's a massive objective statement to make about teams. And it's only sustainable if I really can see, as you've done that job, Wayne, over the time you've been here, I've seen a growth, and we can see the objective data. You're going through some of the courses now at a much higher pace, and you end up having a wonderful discussion, not on what courses you've finished, but on what insights you have as far as your job and how to make it even better. It changes the conversation. And I think that's a very important thing for, you're right, a good digital twin, Disney still runs on its people, and they're the most important thing there.
And when you think about people and competencies and like people's different experiences and skills, the ability to see, like if you're in a corporation, the ability to see that, right? And to understand it. Understand not just the data, their modes of training, because everybody has a different mode by which they train. But these environments, again, allow that kind of training opportunities and a little more tailorable, right? Tailorable to individuals. And then at the end of the day, gives corporations and large organizations the ability to see themselves and to be able to think about, well, you know what? We see, you can start looking at retirements. You can start thinking who you have to bring in, how you might train your current workforce to bring everybody up to the same level.
Yeah, just to reemphasize and affirm what Eileen was just mentioning about running on the people and everything. A lot of those folks, when we build those data models against the digital twins and everything that we worked with on that data platform, we will go out to those experts and help them and have them help us figure out exactly how to build those models, because they have the 15, 10, 20, 30 years experience of working on that. They know exactly what to listen for. They know exactly what to look for. They know how these things will work because they've built that up over time. And I think, we mentioned that earlier too, but the problem is, like, when they leave, how do you capture all that institutional knowledge, right? This is yet another way to do that.
It puts the knowledge in the institution as opposed to sitting solely in someone's head. Yeah.
So thank you for that. Now, as we've talked about the people, and earlier in the discussion, we talked about audience engagement and how this improves that. The final question before we get ready to turn it over to the audience here for a little bit of Q&A that I have for all of the panel members is, when it comes to audience engagement and that experience that you get as you fuse between the digital twin and the physical world, what other applications do you see that being able to translate into? Like the translation of audience experience, that improved engagement.
I have a hard time finding where it wouldn't impact.
Exactly, exactly. I don't know where you're coming from. I'm like,
No, that's good. That's
Where's
good.
your
You
priority?
stimulated.
no, I think it's almost like I think you said it, right, Pete? We're very visual. We're experiential learners. The more experience you have, you know, in engaging with something, well, you know how it is. Look how long it took us to figure out how to tie our shoe when you're 4 years old. Now you right? It's the same concept. The more experience, right?
This slide was meant to also think about something. So this is a slide as if you were standing inside a microchip. So what I am, oh, what is that gold thing? And I want to go push it. I want to understand what all those things are to see where I might fit into this wonderful world. And that's one of the things I really want to pick at. We've been talking about the theatrical uses versus the other uses, but what we're really talking about is a center that is now grounded on the equipment, the environment, and the processes of theater, which is engaging people. Live theater is life. So if I take that stand, how do I take people who are narrative writers? Oh, I guess I'll be a script writer. Oh, great. You could also be writing strategy for someone to be doing X, Y, Z. People who are lighting designers, prop designers. What is the next level of architecture? What is the new reality of architecture if we were building it for the lunar surface? Got to think differently, got to think innovatively. The ability to ask what-if questions at ridiculous levels inside a digital twin around a problem, not just about the ether, but around a problem, is going to be a very, very transdisciplinary, efficiency, risk management, and risk lowering opportunity. And it's really the creative people who are around the theater world and the technical people who are around the theater world, giving all of this the ability to exist, they also are going to start pushing what does the boundaries mean to do military training, to do first response training. What are these wonderful things that will engage STEM educators? And then as the students come up through this system, the possibilities explode. Because they're thinking new things. They don't know the history of people who've already been working for 40 years, and they're just going to come up with new innovation. I couldn't be more excited.
Well, one more thing, Eileen, before I turn it over to each of the panel members for any final comments they might have before we turn it over to the audience for their questions. You wanted to highlight just really quickly the importance of asset libraries.
Sure. So how many people understand exactly how many photos are on their phone? Exactly.
Depends. I got to keep paying for the iCloud.
I kind of lose track of it, yeah, but I forgot those 80 pictures I shot in 30 seconds when I was capturing something at a game. It's like, ugh. The idea of understanding what assets you capture to put into a system, to keep them in one place, so that I understand how many views I have of my grandson right now. Okay, I can do that in my phone, but if I want to look and understand exactly how I could make the same assets that were on that live training, and by the way, that training was ground level incident command. You are the incident commander. The fire is happening. Make decisions and see what happens. The same assets for that are used in the middle to take a play at saying on a third person, how do I help train trainers who are then going to put the lieutenants through that training process? So now I've gone into learner, trainer, and then if I look over here, I'm using the same assets, created once, branded once, digitized once, and put in a system that can be used and used over and over again to look at saying, how do I put together a unified training system where trainers can trigger events, trigger things to happen, set up historical fires in the case of a fire command that we want to look at, and really make it a dynamic collection of assets that are ready for me to use. I don't have to go through IP, I don't have to go through marketing clearance on using it, I don't have to go through copyright, I own it. That's a very powerful thing to be able to say. And comments from you?
No, I just think that, again, you know, if you go back and you think about these digital models and you're creating digital twins, they're life cycle assets, right? And so they're they're like us, right? They're going to have a life, and they're going to get new data, and they're going to get enriched, and they're going to be used for all kinds of purposes, right? So it's just there's that growth, right? It's like a life cycle growth of data and information getting more richer and, you know, better decisions because of those kind of things.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd follow up on, I think this is just a natural transition of how we've gotten so much better at using math and science models over, again, decades, centuries really. What we now have are very powerful computer systems, very precise and large-scale graphic systems, very capable computer software design methodologies that can create all these now. We now have all the capability to do this. We need to take advantage of this opportunity now as all of this is finally pulling together so you can solve some of the really biggest problems we have.
So, you know, with that, I just say, so to me, my thing to say is, you know, actually the future is now. We're fortunate because we're in it, right? We're all in it, and we're all going to be moving it forward. So just, hey, this isn't like way out there. This is what's happening now, and I think I think we're fortunate to be a part of it.
I'm going to give some final comments with this slide up, if
Okay.
that's okay with you. One of the things that helps to look at this, and again, this is one particular dashboard, but one of the other uses of digital twin dashboards I mentioned before is different people want to see different things. The lighting designer does not really care that much where the actors are going to stand. He'll work with the director on that. He wants the lighting design right, so he wants to see copious data about things he's setting up, things he has to change quickly, and how those quick things changed in the last 3 shows that came through. If I am not that, though, so I start picking apart the menu bars that are at the top. Right now we're looking at programming on here, and it is showing seat metrics. It's showing a little view of where the building might be in proximity to the site that it's on, which, again, to go back to the safety person, if I can know, because my digital twin starts tracking emergency vehicles on their way when they've been called, I have 5 or 10 or 2 minutes, whatever, advance notice to be able to have my people ready at the right place. So it's synergy, it's efficiency, and it's skill in making the right decision at the right time for the right role that I have in the whole operation. That's my
Yeah,
thought.
you know what's interesting, you see that upper right picture where it just says campus viewer. The other wonderful thing about the fact that the technology is ready, right? All these things kind of are converging to a point where you can do these things. So now you're not just thinking of a performing arts center that might be sitting on a campus or might be sitting in downtown Orlando, but now you're able to then create the digital twin of the city itself, right? And so you can start thinking about transportation, you can think about from the airport to get to the facility, that whole experience for somebody, right? And so you're gonna start seeing these models being, developed, and they'll be refined piece by piece, but all interconnected, creating kind of this integration of all these digital twins and models.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Grace, I think, again, is digital twins always start with the model. We've been doing 3D visualization in the areas of science and math and even in the arts and everything for, decades now. Certainly, computer-generated imagery and everything around that. But if you don't have a model where you can't change the input and then get a different output, you technically don't have a digital twin. You have a 3D visualization, which is still cool. It can give you an idea about how things look around with data that you're currently ingesting of things that are going on right now, but it won't allow you to optimize what it is you really want to do to solve the problem. And certainly this transportation, and you think about the movement of people and everything around doing that, that's something, we used to take very seriously when I was at Disney. because, you don't want people stuck in certain places where they're not able to enjoy their time. Well, it's the same thing in a community, in a city. You want them to be able to get from point to point so that they can get to their job and then get to their family and then be able to host, certain events and everything as efficiently as they can. But you still need the model at the end of the day to do that.
Well, that's a perfect segue now, where I'm going to turn it over to the audience at this point in time for any questions that may be out there on this. Yes.
We have someone with a microphone, so if you could just, yeah.
Is it already on? Okay. Thank you, first of all. Can I give you a very specific real-world example, just to try to understand how this could work?
Sure.
Okay, so say I'm a set designer, and a set piece isn't working correctly, and there's a performance going on in the actual space, right? So I can't get in there, we can't look at it. So can I take my technical director and go to a rehearsal space and look at a model of the set and see what's not working? Are we wearing VR goggles? Like, how are we looking at this to see what's wrong, maybe make a change in the model of the set? You know what I mean? How are we doing that?
So, and again, I'm going to concept this because it hasn't got, yes, what you should be able to do is to call up the, I'm going to use this as the stage. You call up the digital twin. It is opening a virtual space. An instantiation I certainly see for the set designer is a VR or an XR, I'll say, because
Okay.
AR would be, even
Right,
better.
right.
Yes, you should be able to go in there, and whether it is a movement off stage, a pivot, the use of it or whatever, play with that space. And if you're in a space that has enough room, I mean, you could even have the set piece in there and then be able
Right.
to manipulate the physical set piece while it's gathering data and while you're really being able to understand how that would work in situ. That is absolutely the intent.
And let me, because I love that question. Great question, right? Because, so if you're in this environment, right, I mean, you can use it in a lot of different ways, right? Whether you're in a large virtual space where you can see projection of everything to any kind of, a VR type device. Or you might just be, you want to look at it and you're looking at it your laptop, right?
Right.
And you're being able to move things around. But I think the important thing too is that then you'll be able to say, if I do this and I do that and I shift things around, you'll be able to actually see or go through it, using the simulations that are part of that, the digital twin, to see what would happen, right? So if I move this over here, is that better than if I left it over here, right? And so you're going to be able to do a lot of those what ifs. And I think right today you see a lot of this happening. And it's interesting how it becomes a communication tool. Mm-hmm. So now you don't have to sit and try to get people to understand your perspective, right? You show them.
Yeah.
You show them the data, you show them the models, you show that, hey, if you move this here, you see the complication you're creating for the rest of these three individuals, right?
Yeah, that's one of the keys, I think, is being able to visualize of whatever it is you're doing in any of these spaces, whether it's science, math, or the arts. I quickly realized when I came to work for Disney after I was at TI, I was not going to be able to show up a huge column of numbers and have people look at those and go, oh, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I had to create a visual representation of what's going to. You will be able to solve your problem in your set design much quicker in something like this. And we've actually used some of our digital twin designs to do lighting and set movements and everything around a lot of things we've already done. They've come in tremendously handy on the ships. That's been very important for things that we've done in the ships in the past. And so but again, it's the concept of using principles like this is many decades old, because when people were working on figuring out how to build an aerospace platform, a 707 or early Apollo flight dynamics, they were using simulation, digital twins to do that. Much more rudimentary computer systems to be able to do it. But they were under the same problem. They couldn't test fire hundreds of Apollo 5 rockets or 707s and hope that they would fly. They had to use these methods now. Now, we have the ability to use this across a very large group of disciplines to solve those problems with much more advanced computer and visualization systems.
We had another question. Yes.
Oh, I was just curious, how is the data being collected? I know you guys mentioned sensors and other things, but like, are people like aware as theater goers that it's being collected, and who owns it?
So very good question, and I'm going to answer from this level. Just like I said, a digital twin of someone who's working, they should be the center of that universe of what's known and not. The intent here is not to get any personally identifiable information about anyone, but the idea of using somewhat similar, and I'll say somewhat similar, to the line in the California Adventure, where the people are like making the things move on the wall, and people are interacting and things like this. It's not the same thing, but the idea of using where my head is turning, where I might be up and down or moving, whether a seat's occupied, whether people are leaning like this and it's obviously they're talking to people, or whether everyone is leaning, like moving in motion, like we got them today. Those sorts of things are things that you would see in any public arena. The intent is not in the public space to go beyond that for public. I would hope and I would expect that from the actor's point of view, there would be more of a pull to say, no, I want you to censor me because I want to understand why I'm 2 seconds late getting out of that thing every single time we run that. And it's driving the set designer crazy because they know I can move faster. I'm not going to knock it over. It's like, just get started. So it's that idea, yes. If people think their data is being grabbed or their phone's being scanned, or no. And I think that's very important because in the future, we will need to make those decisions as audience members or as creators. What do we do about that question? Because it's an ethical question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
I just want to follow up just on what I said about the hundreds of thousands of sensors that are working on the ride systems and the show systems. Those are industrial, grade sensors that are just hooked to the industrial control systems. Those are not monitoring human activity, right? Those are monitoring electromechanical systems. And the nice thing about that is that data is yours because it's sitting on your facility and you're gathering the data, and then you can manage it however you need to.
So in some cases, what you're talking about is maybe sensors that aren't they could be sensors in a seat that, that are sensing, even in your car today, right? Modern cars, they can sense if you're getting tired, and a little thing will say, you must be tired. Some of these things are happening. And so I think, it's like one technology at a time, thinking about the data and the issues and the ethical issues. That conversation is going on today, right? We're seeing it just with our own data and what we're doing on our phones every day, right?
Yeah, and going back to thinking about, you are ingesting a tremendous amount of data from any of these sensor systems and everything. It is all about data mining at the end of the day, and so you have to be really good in thinking about how you're going to do that. And managing that data is critically important.
Well, that concludes our time here today. I'm extremely grateful to have had the opportunity to moderate this panel. I hope the audience has learned and enjoyed it as much as I have. So, number one, I'm going to thank the audience as we're midway through the 2 weeks of UCF Celebrating the Arts. Thank you for taking your time and coming out here today. And in turn, I'm also going to thank this distinguished panel. This has been a phenomenal discussion. Thank you for your time, thank you for your knowledge, and thank you for the impact that you've had on this community, each and every one of you.
Us off. But, come visit us on campus. We're in the research park, and, more than happy to have continue this conversation about digital twins and modeling and hearing, the perspectives and surely how the performing arts would be thinking about using something like this. So, like I said, future's now.
Thank you.